1 month after my son's wedding, the photographer called me and whispered, "Sir, I noticed something terrible in the photos. Come immediately alone and don't say anything to your son." The phone rang just as I set down my coffee. Tuesday morning, quiet house in Phoenix. Financial reports spread across my desk, the kind of peaceful moment I'd earned after 30 years building Miller Hardware. 3 stores across the valley. Good business, good life. I almost didn't answer the unknown number. "My name is Leonard Miller, 58 years old, and I thought I knew my sons. Mr. Miller?" The woman's voice trembled. "This is Nancy Williams. I photographed Eugene's wedding last month. I need to see you immediately. Alone. Please don't tell your son." My hand tightened on the phone. "What's wrong?" "I can't explain over the phone, but I found something in the photographs. Something very serious." The air in my office changed, became thinner somehow. "What kind of something?" "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., my studio downtown. Please, Mr. Miller, come alone." Before I could respond, Howard's voice exploded from the kitchen. "Dad, I told you 3 times already. I need that car loan. My truck is embarrassing." "You promised you'd think about it." Beverly's laugh echoed from upstairs, some video call blaring through the ceiling. I'd built a guest house for visiting grandchildren that never came. Instead, Howard and his girlfriend had been living there for 4 years, rent-free. "I'll be there," I said into the phone, barely hearing my own voice. Nancy exhaled. "Thank you." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Miller. I really am." She hung up. I sat motionless at my desk, the phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the framed photograph on my wall. Eugene in his tuxedo, radiant. Patricia beside him in her wedding dress. 1 month ago, $35,000 I'd spent on that day. Worth every penny to see my eldest son happy. Something very serious in the photographs. "Dad?" Howard appeared in my doorway, phone in one hand, truck keys in the other. "Did you hear me? I need money for a new truck. Mine's 12 years old and it's humiliating." I looked at my youngest son, 31 years old, living in my guest house for 4 years now. Temporarily, he'd said when he moved in after losing his job. Beverly had followed 6 months later, no rent, no end date, no respect. We'll talk about it later. Later when, "I need to go to the dealership this week. Beverly's friend got a new SUV and I can't keep showing up in that piece of junk." I turned back to my computer screen, the numbers blurred. "Dad, are you listening?" "Later, Howard." He huffed and disappeared. His footsteps stomped across the guest house. A door slammed. I could hear him through the windows, complaining to Beverly about my stubbornness. Same conversation we'd had a dozen times. Different week, same demands. I picked up my coffee, cold now. Through my office window, the Phoenix morning stretched bright and cloudless. July heat already building at 8:30 a.m. Everything looked normal. Felt wrong. The day crawled forward like a wounded animal. I tried focusing on inventory reports, quarterly projections, employee schedules, numbers that usually made sense, profit margins that typically brought satisfaction. My mind kept circling back to Nancy's trembling voice. Something very serious in the photographs. The wedding had been perfect, hadn't it? Eugene had glowed in his tuxedo, confident and handsome. Patricia had been elegant in her designer dress, graceful during the ceremony. The country club had provided the perfect backdrop, all manicured lawns and desert views. The reception at the hotel had been classy, tasteful, expensive, everything I'd wanted for my eldest son's big day. What could possibly be wrong with the photographs? Around noon, Beverly wandered into my office without knocking, never knocked, just walked in like she owned the place. 29 years old, unemployed for the better part of 2 years, living off my hospitality and Howard's sporadic income from odd jobs. "Hey, Mr. Miller. Howard says you're being weird about the truck thing. I didn't look up from my computer. I said we'd discuss it later." "Yeah, but he's pretty set on it." "Maybe just give him the money, keep the peace." She leaned against my doorframe, arms crossed, that casual entitlement I'd grown to recognize. Happy son, happy life, right? Happy son. Howard had never asked me to marry Beverly. 4 years together, living in my house, and he couldn't be bothered to make it official. But Beverly had strong opinions about how I should spend my money. "Beverly, I'm working. Sure. Just saying, it's not like you can't afford it. Business is good, right? And Howard really needs reliable transportation for job interviews." Job interviews. Howard hadn't been on a job interview in 6 months. I kept my mouth shut, focused on the screen in front of me. Think about it, okay? He's your son. Family helps. Family. She left, her flip-flops slapping against the hardwood floors. Through my window, I watched her walk across the yard to the guest house, phone already pressed to her ear, probably calling Howard with a status report on the truck money negotiation. I stood and walked to my window below. My pool sparkled unused. I'd had it installed 5 years ago, thinking the boys might visit more often, maybe bring friends or future grandchildren. Instead, it sat empty most days while Howard and Beverly occupied the guest house I'd built with such hope. The guest house sat at the far edge of the property, complete with its own entrance, full kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a living area. I'd designed it thinking visiting grandchildren might use it someday. Maybe Eugene and Patricia would stay there when they came for holidays. Maybe Howard would get married and need temporary housing while house hunting. No grandchildren yet. No holiday visits from Eugene. Just Howard and Beverly settled in like permanent residents who'd never signed a lease. The afternoon bled into evening like honey from a broken jar. Slow, sticky, leaving everything it touched somehow different. I heated leftover pasta from Sunday's dinner, ate alone at my kitchen counter while Beverly occupied my living room and Howard video called someone in the guest house. His laugh pierced through the windows, too loud, too long, the sound of a man who'd never learned to consider others. At 7:30, my doorbell rang. Eugene stood on my front step, perfect as always. Tailored shirt, pressed khakis, that confident smile he'd inherited from his mother. My eldest, my successful one, insurance agent with his own office in Scottsdale, married to Patricia for exactly 1 month and 2 days. "Hi, Dad." He kissed my cheek and walked past me into the house. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by. Scottsdale to Paradise Valley wasn't exactly the neighborhood, but I didn't mention it. Eugene had a way of bending geography to suit his convenience. He settled onto my couch, crossed his legs, looked around the living room like he was appraising it for an estate sale. "How are you? You look tired. Long day." "Business things." He picked up a framed photo from my side table. Him and Howard as children, maybe 8 and 4, arms around each other at some long-forgotten birthday party. Eugene studied it like he was seeing it for the first time, then set it back down slightly off-center. Small gesture, but it bothered me more than it should have. Patricia and I have been house hunting. We found the most incredible place in North Scottsdale. 4 bedrooms, pool, mountain views. Absolutely perfect for starting a family. I sat in the chair across from him, waited for whatever came next. Eugene never visited just to chat. "The thing is, we need to move fast. Market's competitive right now, especially for properties in that price range. We need help with the down payment." He smiled, that warm, practiced smile I'd seen him use on clients. $25,000, you understand, right? After everything you spent on the wedding, this is just completing the picture. Helping us start our life together properly. $25,000. He said it like he was asking to borrow my lawnmower for the weekend. Something in my chest tightened. That hollow feeling from Nancy's phone call expanded, spreading through my ribs like cold water. $25,000, I repeated. "Is that a problem?" A slight edge entered his voice. So slight most people wouldn't catch it, but I'd been watching Eugene negotiate since he was 12 years old, talking his way out of chores and into later bedtimes. "Dad, we need to move fast. This is important. Patricia and I were building something here. This house represents our future." I looked at my son, really looked at him. The designer clothes that cost more than some people made in a week. The manicured appearance, every hair in place, every crease sharp. The practiced warmth that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Let me think about it, son." His smile faltered just for a second, just long enough for me to catch the flash of irritation underneath. "Think about it, Dad. This is important. Patricia and I have already put in an offer contingent on financing. We can't lose this house. I need to review some things first. Check my accounts, make sure I can handle that kind of withdrawal without affecting the business." He stood abruptly, movements sharp with barely contained frustration. "Fine, but don't take too long. Real estate moves fast in North Scottsdale. Good properties don't stay on the market." He grabbed his keys from the coffee table, kissed my cheek again. "Colder this time? Perfunctory love you, Dad. Call me soon, okay?" Patricia's really excited about this place. I watched his BMW pull away, standing in my doorway until the taillights disappeared around the corner. $25,000 delivered like I'd already agreed. Like my money was his money, like 30 years of building a business existed solely to fund his lifestyle upgrades. Beverly's voice echoed from the guest house, some argument with Howard about dinner plans. Through my living room window, I could see them gesturing at each other in their kitchen. My kitchen technically, my guest house, my utilities, my property taxes. I walked back inside, but something had shifted. The house felt different. Or maybe I was seeing it clearly for the first time. The way Beverly walked through my home like she owned it. The way Howard made demands instead of requests. The way Eugene assumed my support without ever asking for it. My phone sat on the hall table where I'd left it. Nancy's number still in the call log, tomorrow morning, her studio. Whatever she'd found in those wedding photographs, I had a feeling it would explain this hollow sensation spreading through my chest like a slow poison. I picked up the phone and looked at Eugene's last text message, sent while he was driving away. "Thanks for understanding about the house, Dad. Love you." I hadn't agreed to anything, but he'd assumed. They all assumed. Howard assumed I'd eventually buy him a new truck. Beverly assumed I'd continue providing free housing. Eugene assumed I'd finance his real estate dreams. When had I become an assumption instead of a person? I left the house before Howard woke up the next morning. Didn't want questions about where I was going. Didn't want Beverly asking if I'd thought about the truck loan with that expectant look she got, like everything I did required her approval in my own home. The drive to downtown Phoenix took 25 minutes in light Wednesday morning traffic. I-17 south, then surface streets through neighborhoods I'd watched change over 3 decades of living here. Strip malls where orange groves used to be. Housing developments carved into desert that used to stretch empty to the mountains. Nancy's studio occupied a converted warehouse in the Arts District. One of those areas the city kept trying to revitalize with mixed success. Her name appeared on a brass plate beside a heavy steel door, elegant script that suggested serious professional work. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my mind kept replaying her voice from yesterday's call, something very serious. The way she'd whispered it like someone might be listening. The way she'd insisted I come alone. I parked across the street and sat in my truck for a moment, watching the morning foot traffic. Artists heading to studios, coffee shop workers unlocking doors, the kind of people who worked with their hands and took pride in crafting something real. Honest work, the kind of values I tried to instill in my sons. Whatever waited inside that studio, whatever Nancy had found, it would change things. I could feel it in my bones, the way you sense a storm coming hours before the first clouds appear. The air pressure drops, birds go quiet, and I knew. The studio smelled like coffee and printer ink, with undertones of photochemicals and that particular mustiness old buildings get in the desert. Professional photographs lined the walls in carefully arranged galleries. Weddings, families, corporate headshots, clean compositions, perfect lighting, the kind of technical skill that comes from years of practice. Nancy met me at the door looking younger than I'd remembered from Eugene's wedding day. Mid-40s maybe, with nervous hands and apologetic eyes that kept darting toward the back of the studio. "Mr. Miller, thank you for coming." She locked the door behind me with deliberate precision. I have everything set up in the editing room. I followed her through the gallery space, past displays of her work that showed real talent. She specialized in capturing moments people would want to remember forever. Couples gazing at each other with genuine love, children laughing with pure joy. Families gathered around tables connected by something deeper than just shared genetics. The editing room dominated the back of the studio, built around a massive monitor and computer equipment that probably cost more than most people's cars. Wedding portfolios filled shelves along one wall, each one representing someone's perfect day, carefully preserved in high-resolution digital files. The window overlooked an alley where morning light filtered through dusty glass, casting everything in soft amber tones, peaceful, professional. The kind of place where people came to turn their most precious memories into art. "Can I get you coffee?" "Water." "I'm fine." I wasn't fine. My stomach felt like I'd swallowed a handful of nails. "Please just show me." She nodded and sat at her computer station. I remained standing behind her chair, close enough to see the screen clearly, but far enough back to maintain some emotional distance from whatever was coming. "Mr. Miller, I almost didn't call you. I went back and forth for days, asking myself if this was my business, if I had the right to involve myself in your family's affairs." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but if I were in your position, I'd want to know, please understand, I didn't go looking for this. My throat tightened. "Show me." Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. The monitor filled with images from Eugene's wedding, and for a moment, everything looked exactly as I remembered. The ceremony in the country club's garden pavilion. Eugene waiting at the altar in his tuxedo, confident and handsome. Patricia walking down the aisle in her mother's restored wedding dress, radiant with happiness. Geese smiling from their chairs, some dabbing at their eyes with tissues, the string quartet I'd hired playing softly in the background. Everything beautiful, everything perfect, everything exactly as a wedding should be. "These are the standard shots," Nancy said softly. "What you saw at the wedding, what everyone saw. The official moments, the poses, the formal documentation of the day." She clicked to another folder, and the timestamp changed. But I was at the hotel venue early that morning around 10 a.m., testing exposures and calibrating my equipment. The lighting in hotel venues can be tricky, especially when you're shooting through windows. Another click. There's a balcony on the 3rd floor that overlooks the courtyard where the reception was held. I was up there checking sight lines, making sure I could get good candid shots during cocktail hour. The screen changed again, showing a different set of photos. These looked more casual, unposed, test shots, technical calibration images. Nancy was clearly a professional who took her craft seriously, leaving nothing to chance. I was shooting through a window, adjusting my light settings when I captured this. The image that appeared on the screen hit me like a physical blow. My hands gripped the back of her chair so hard I could hear the leather creak. Eugene, my son in his tuxedo but not yet fully dressed for the ceremony. The jacket hung open, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, bow tie loose around his neck. He was pressed against a woman with dark hair that caught the morning sunlight. Not Patricia, someone else entirely. They were kissing, not a friendly peck on the cheek, not a goodbye embrace between old friends. This was intimate, possessive, familiar. His hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck, both of them lost in a moment that had nothing to do with wedding preparation and everything to do with passion. How long before the ceremony, my voice sounded far away, like someone else was speaking. 2 hours and 15 minutes before the ceremony began. The metadata is all here. She pulled up a technical display showing numbers, timestamps, GPS coordinates. I was testing exposures through a hotel window on the 3rd floor. I captured this completely by accident, but it's real. And there are multiple shots. She clicked forward to the next image. Different angle, same scene. Eugene and the dark-haired woman locked together on the hotel balcony, completely absorbed in each other. In this shot, I could see more of the woman's face. Pretty, probably early 30s, with the kind of confident posture that came from professional success. There are 7 photos total, Nancy said quietly. I didn't realize what I'd captured until I was reviewing the images later that evening. I almost deleted them, thought they were just accidents, test shots gone wrong. But then I looked closer. She pulled up another image, this one showing the woman's left hand pressed against Eugene's chest. Clear as daylight, impossible to miss. Wedding ring gold band with what looked like a substantial diamond. Not some casual girlfriend or old college flame rekindling romance. A married woman with my son, 2 hours before his wedding to Patricia. Do you know who she is? I leaned closer to the screen, studying her face, trying to place her from the wedding guest list. Nancy shook her head. I don't recognize her from any of the wedding photos. She wasn't at the ceremony or reception, at least not that I could see. I've been through every image from that day. She opened another file, and the screen filled with a clearer shot of the woman. Professional-looking, well-dressed, even in what appeared to be casual morning attire. The kind of woman who belonged in boardrooms and corner offices. Mr. Miller, there's something else you should see? Nancy's voice got even quieter. This next photo shows your son's face very clearly. I want you to look at his expression. The image that appeared made my stomach turn. Eugene's face in profile, no confusion in his features, no drunken stumble or moment of weakness, just confidence, control, satisfaction. The expression of a man who knew exactly what he was doing and felt no guilt about it. 2 hours and 15 minutes before marrying Patricia. 2 hours and 15 minutes before standing in front of 150 guests and promising to love, honor, and cherish his bride. 2 hours and 15 minutes before I handed over $35,000 for what I thought was the happiest day of his life. I straightened slowly, my knees feeling weak. The room tilted slightly, then righted itself as I gripped the back of Nancy's chair. Can you prove the timing beyond any doubt? Absolutely. Nancy opened another window on her computer, showing me technical data I barely understood but recognized as thorough. Digital fingerprints, file information, GPS coordinates matching the hotel location exactly. Timestamps down to the second. This is forensic level evidence, Mr. Miller. It would hold up in any court, any investigation. There's no question about when or where these photos were taken. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small flash drive, holding it like it contained something precious and dangerous. Everything is here. All the photos, all the metadata, complete technical documentation. I made copies before calling you. She held it out to me. I don't know what you'll do with this information, Mr. Miller, but I believe you should have it. As a father, as someone who paid for that wedding, as someone who deserves to know the truth. I took the flash drive, closed my fist around it. Such a small thing to contain such devastating information. Don't apologize, Nancy. You did the right thing, the difficult thing, but the right thing. The drive back to Paradise Valley passed in a fog of disbelief and growing anger. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, stared at the road through summer heat shimmer that made everything look unreal. But this was real. Eugene Miller, my eldest son, my pride and joy, kissing another man's wife hours before his own wedding. Not a mistake. Not cold feet. Not a moment of weakness or last-minute panic about commitment. Calculated. Deliberate. Planned. Why marry Patricia at all? The question circled my thoughts like a vulture waiting for something to die. If Eugene had another woman, a woman who clearly meant something to him, why go through with a $35,000 wedding? Why make those vows? Why smile in those photos? Why put Patricia through the charade? Why put me through it? My truck knew the way home without conscious navigation. Paradise Valley streets lined with palm trees and desert landscaping. My neighborhood of successful middle-class families. My driveway leading to the house I'd worked 30 years to afford. The flash drive sat in my shirt pocket, heavy as a stone and twice as cold. I pulled into my garage just after 11 a.m. The house looked exactly the same as when I'd left 2 hours ago. Same stucco exterior, same red tile roof, same security light that needed fixing, same everything. But I wasn't the same. I opened the front door and heard the familiar sounds of my invaded home. Howard sprawled across my leather recliner, beer in hand despite the early hour, some game show blaring from my TV. He didn't look up when I entered. "Hey, old man, grab me another beer while you're up and we need to talk about that truck loan." From the guest house, Beverly's voice carried through the open windows. "Leonard, is that you? I need to talk to you about money for a spa weekend. My stress levels are through the roof living in this situation." I stood in my own entryway, flash drive burning a hole in my pocket, and something inside me that had been bending for years finally started to crack. My son's husband cheating hours before the wedding, my other son demanding beer service in my own home, his girlfriend requesting spa money for the stress of living rent-free in my guest house. They thought I was the same man who'd left this morning, worried about a photographer's mysterious phone call. They were wrong. I closed the front door behind me with a quiet click and headed straight to my office. Sleep was impossible that night. I sat in my office past midnight, the flash drive from Nancy positioned on my desk like a piece of evidence in a crime scene. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photographs. Eugene's face, confident and guilt-free. The married woman's wedding ring catching the morning light. The timestamp showing exactly when my son's integrity died. I opened my laptop and pulled up the wedding budget spreadsheet I'd created 6 months ago. $35,000, itemized down to the last flower arrangement and cocktail napkin. Venue rental, catering for 150 guests, photographer, band, flowers, Patricia's dress alterations. Everything Eugene and Patricia had wanted. Everything they'd insisted was necessary for their perfect day. But one detail suddenly seemed suspicious. Patricia had been very specific about one thing: cash gifts instead of a traditional registry. "Dad, we're starting fresh together," she'd explained during one of our planning meetings. "We don't need china patterns or kitchen appliances. Cash is more practical for a young couple. It gives us flexibility to buy what we actually need." I'd thought she was being mature, realistic. Most young couples did accumulate duplicate wedding gifts that ended up in closets or returned to stores. Cash seemed sensible. Now I wondered what I'd actually paid for. I grabbed a legal pad and started writing down numbers, dates, details that had seemed innocent at the time but now felt calculated. The guest list had been of 150 people, mostly my business associates, longtime friends, people who had known Eugene since childhood and wanted to celebrate his happiness. Each guest had brought an envelope to the reception. I remembered the gift table near the entrance. White linen cloth covered with cream-colored envelopes, some thick enough to suggest generous checks inside. Eugene had hired someone specifically to collect them, a young woman with a clipboard who cataloged each gift and sender. "We want to make sure we send proper thank you notes," Patricia had explained. The week after the wedding, Eugene had called with the total, $28,000 in cash and checks. He'd sounded almost giddy with excitement. "Patricia and I are so blessed, Dad. Everyone was so generous. We had no idea people would be this kind to us." I wrote that number down and circled it. $28,000 from 150 guests. That meant an average gift of about $187 per person, which seemed reasonable for my social circle. Hardware store owners, contractors, small business people who understood the value of money and appreciated young couples starting out. Then I remembered something else that made my stomach clench. My business partner, Roger Davis, had handed Eugene a check directly at the reception, bypassing the gift table entirely. "Welcome to the family, son. Start your life right," Roger had said, shaking Eugene's hand while I stood nearby, proud as any father could be. I'd been standing right there when Roger handed over that check. $5,000. Roger was wealthy, more successful than most of our circle, and generous to people he respected. Eugene had pocketed that check and smiled with perfect sincerity. "Thank you, sir. Patricia and I won't forget this kindness." $33,000 total from one wedding. For a couple supposedly just starting out, that represented more money than many families saw in a year. Enough to furnish an entire house, buy 2 reliable cars, or put a substantial down payment on property. Why marry Patricia at all? I stared at that question on my legal pad, pen hovering over the paper like I could force an answer to appear through will alone. If Eugene had another woman, a woman he obviously cared enough about to risk everything just hours before his wedding, why go through with the ceremony? Why make those vows in front of 150 witnesses? Why smile in those photographs? Why accept all that money from people who believed in his commitment to Patricia? Unless the vows didn't matter, unless the commitment was a lie, unless the money was the whole point, the thought hit me like a physical blow. I leaned back in my chair, legal pad falling to my lap, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead. What if the entire wedding had been a business transaction disguised as a love story? What if I'd paid $35,000 to host a fraud? My stomach turned over. The night stretched ahead like a desert highway, dark and endless. I made coffee around 3 a.m., stood at my kitchen window, watching the guest house where Howard and Beverly slept peacefully, supported by my generosity while they planned their next financial request. At 7 a.m., I showered and dressed in business casual clothes. Khakis, polo shirt, the uniform of a man who'd built something with his hands and intended to protect it. I left the house before Howard woke up. Didn't want questions about my early departure or suspicious looks from Beverly. The bank opened at 9 a.m. sharp. I drove to the downtown Phoenix branch where I'd done business banking for 15 years. Professional territory, neutral ground where I could ask questions without raising eyebrows. Carol Henderson, the branch manager, greeted me in her office with the warm efficiency that had made our relationship work smoothly over the years. We'd weathered economic downturns together, celebrated business growth, handled everything from equipment loans to employee payroll issues. Mr. Miller, what brings you in this morning? Nothing wrong with the business accounts, I hope? Nothing wrong? No. I wanted to verify a check I wrote recently. Wedding gift for my son Eugene, $5,000. I want to make sure it cleared properly. Maybe get some details about the deposit. Carol pulled up my account on her computer, fingers clicking across the keyboard with practiced speed. Let me see. Yes, here it is. Check number 1247, $5,000, deposited to a joint account for Eugene and Patricia Miller. Cleared without any issues. Joint account, I said casually, like the information meant nothing special. When did they open that account? Carol scrolled through additional screens, accessing information I couldn't see from my side of her desk. Looks like it was opened 6 weeks ago, May 15th to be exact. 6 weeks before the wedding. Not months earlier when they got engaged, not years ago when they started dating seriously. 6 weeks. Right in the middle of intensive wedding planning. They must have moved fast on the wedding planning, I said, keeping my voice light and conversational. Young people these days don't waste time when they know what they want. Carol smiled, the practiced smile of a banker who'd seen every kind of financial decision. Everything happens quickly with young couples. Engagement, wedding planning, joint accounts, house hunting. They're in such a hurry to start their lives together. I thanked her and left, but my mind was racing faster than my truck as I drove through late morning traffic, May 15th. Eugene and Patricia had opened a joint account specifically 6 weeks before the wedding, not when they got engaged 18 months ago, not when they started talking about marriage. 6 weeks before the ceremony, that timing felt deliberate, calculated, like they'd sat down and planned exactly how to collect and manage wedding gifts. This wasn't romance, this was logistics. I drove home through neighborhoods that looked different now, like I was seeing them through new eyes. Strip malls and housing developments that represented honest work, honest families, honest relationships. Everything Eugene's marriage apparently wasn't. The house looked quiet when I pulled into my garage. Howard's truck sat in the driveway, that old Ford he refused to maintain properly. Always asking for money to fix something that broke down because he wouldn't invest in basic upkeep. I entered through the garage door to my kitchen, planning to go straight to my office to process what I'd learned at the bank. Then I heard Howard's voice carrying from the guest house, loud enough to penetrate the windows I'd left open to catch the morning breeze. Yeah, Dad looked suspicious lately. I froze in my hallway, hand on the office doorknob. Howard was on the phone, volume turned up too high the way he always talked, like the person on the other end might be deaf. I moved closer to the kitchen window, staying hidden behind the curtain, and listened. I don't know what's got into him. Different somehow, like he's paying attention to things he usually ignores. But don't worry, bro. Beverly and I can stretch this situation another year, maybe 2 if we play it right. By then, he'll cave and buy us that condo just to get rid of us. The voice on the other end was Eugene, coming through Howard's phone speaker clearly enough for me to recognize every word. Perfect. I've got about 3 more months of playing the devoted husband. Then Patricia files for divorce like we planned. Half those wedding gifts are legally mine under Arizona community property law. We already worked out the 60-40 split. My hand found the wall, steadied myself. The kitchen seemed to tilt sideways for a moment before righting itself. Howard laughed. That careless sound I'd heard too many times. And Beverly's been working on the truck loan angle. Dad's so busy feeling proud of your marriage, he doesn't see what's happening right under his nose. Keep him distracted, Eugene said, his voice carrying the cool calculation of a man discussing business rather than family. Make him think you need something big, something expensive. That way, when I ask for the house down payment next week, it won't seem excessive by comparison. Already on it? Asked him about the truck yesterday, played up the embarrassment angle. He looked annoyed, but he'll come around. He always does. Good. Patricia's getting impatient. She wants to file the divorce papers and get this over with. But I told her we need to wait until the 3-month mark. Any sooner and it looks suspicious. Howard's voice dropped slightly, but I could still hear every word. What about the girlfriend? She getting suspicious about the timing? Rebecca thinks I'm leaving Patricia for her. She has no idea about the financial arrangement. Thinks this is all about true love conquering obstacles. Eugene's laugh was cold, empty. Women want to believe in fairy tales. Makes them easier to manipulate. Rebecca, so the married woman in Nancy's photographs had a name. This is perfect, Howard continued. Dad's so distracted by your fake happy marriage that he doesn't notice Beverly and me bleeding him dry. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll have enough saved to disappear if necessary. Just remember the timeline, Eugene warned. 3 months, then Patricia files, we split the wedding money, and I start my new life with Rebecca. You and Beverly milk the guest house situation as long as possible. When Dad finally kicks you out, we'll all be set up somewhere else, playing the devoted husband. Howard repeated Eugene's earlier phrase. Man, if Dad could hear this conversation, he'd have a heart attack. Dad's not as smart as he thinks he is. 30 years of running hardware stores doesn't prepare you for real strategy. He's emotional, sentimental. Guys like that always get taken advantage of by people who think ahead. I backed away from the window, silent as a ghost, and made my way to my office. Closed the door with exaggerated care, leaned against it until my heartbeat slowed to something resembling normal. 2 sons, both lying, both using me. One planning divorce to steal wedding money, the other squatting in my guest house while running out the clock until I bought him off to get rid of the problem. Playing the devoted husband. Easiest $28,000 I ever made. I'd been right about the business transaction. The wedding was a scam, start to finish. Eugene and Patricia had coordinated everything, opened joint accounts specifically to collect gifts, planned the divorce timeline, calculated the money split. Howard and Beverly were running a parallel con, exploiting my hospitality while positioning themselves for a final payoff. I sat down at my computer and typed property lawyer Phoenix, Arizona into the search engine. Gerald Thompson's name appeared second in the results. 20 years of experience specializing in real estate law, family trusts, and asset protection. His office had an opening tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I made the appointment without hesitation. Then I sat back in my chair and looked at my closed office door. Beyond it, Howard was probably still on the phone with Eugene, both of them comfortable and confident in their schemes. They had no idea I'd heard everything. They had no idea what was coming. I didn't either, not exactly, but tomorrow I'd start finding out. Tomorrow I'd begin the transformation from victim to strategist. Tomorrow I'd stop being a wallet with a heartbeat and become something much more dangerous. A father who finally understood the game. Gerald Thompson's office was on the 18th floor of a glass building downtown. The kind of place where serious legal work got done by people who understood the difference between justice and revenge. I arrived 10 minutes early and spent them in the parking garage organizing my Manila folder one last time. Wedding spreadsheet with all the financial details. Flash drive from Nancy containing the affair photos. My handwritten notes from last night. 3 pages of timelines, quotes, and dollar amounts that painted a picture of systematic deception. Evidence of a crime disguised as a family celebration. The elevator ride up felt longer than it should have. I'd made business decisions for 30 years, negotiated supplier contracts, handled employee disputes, weathered economic downturns that would have broken weaker men. This shouldn't feel different, but it did. This was my family, my sons. The elevator doors opened. No, not family, not anymore. They'd made that choice when they turned me into a transaction, a resource to be exploited rather than a father to be respected. The reception area projected understated success. Glass desk, leather chairs, abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. A woman in her 40s looked up from her computer with the kind of professional smile that meant business. Mr. Miller, Mr. Thompson is ready for you. His office commanded a view of Phoenix that stretched to the mountains, all floor-to-ceiling windows and mahogany furniture that spoke of decades building a successful practice. Law books lined one wall, diplomas and bar certificates in expensive frames. Gerald Thompson stood as I entered, probably mid-50s, gray at the temples, handshake firm enough to suggest he'd worked with his hands before he worked with his mind. Mr. Miller, please have a seat. Can I offer you coffee? Yes, black. He poured from a carafe on the credenza, handed me a ceramic mug that felt substantial in my hands, settled behind his desk with the relaxed attention of someone who'd heard every kind of story and knew how to listen without judgment. I reviewed your intake form last night. You mentioned property issues and family matters, specifically fraud concerns. Tell me what's happening. Start wherever makes sense to you. I placed my manila folder on his polished desk and opened it with deliberate precision, like I was presenting evidence in a courtroom rather than seeking advice in a law office. A month ago, I paid for my son's wedding $35,000. 3 days ago, the photographer showed me pictures of my son with another woman 2 hours before the ceremony. Yesterday, I discovered both my sons planned this from the beginning. The marriage was a scam designed to collect cash gifts. Thompson's pen paused over his legal pad, but his expression didn't change. Professional poker face earned through years of hearing the worst of human nature. When you say both sons planned this, you have evidence of coordination between them? I overheard my younger son on the phone with his brother. Direct quotes. 3 more months of playing devoted husband, then Patricia files for divorce. Half the gifts are legally mine. We already worked out the 60-40 split. Those were my eldest son's exact words. I slid the flash drive across his desk. The affair photos are here, metadata included, timestamps, GPS coordinates, everything needed to prove when and where they were taken. Thompson inserted the drive into his computer and clicked through the files. His expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes, the barely perceptible shake of his head. And your younger son, Howard? He's been living in my guest house for 4 years with his girlfriend. No rent, no lease, constant money demands. I pulled out my handwritten notes from the overheard conversation. Yesterday's phone call. He told my eldest son they'd stretch the arrangement another year until I bought them a condo to get rid of the problem. Thompson made notes, circled specific details, underlined 4 years, and no lease, like he was building a case file rather than just taking consultation notes. Mr. Miller, in Arizona, property law is very clear regarding situations like this. Your house is your property. If there's no written rental agreement and you've indicated there isn't, you have the absolute right to begin eviction proceedings. The standard timeline is 30 days after written notice, and my younger son, his girlfriend, they've lived there 4 years without paying rent. Can they fight this legally? Not successfully? Without a lease agreement, they're essentially guests who've overstayed their welcome. Arizona law strongly protects property owners in these situations. The 30-day notice is a legal courtesy, not a negotiation. Something loosened in my chest for the first time since Nancy's phone call. A courtesy, not a negotiation. Thompson pulled a thick book from his shelf, Arizona Property Code, opened to a section marked with yellow tabs, turned it so I could read the relevant statutes. I leaned forward and scanned the legal text. Residential tenancy requirements, notice periods, eviction procedures, everything laid out in black and white. It's straightforward, Thompson explained. We draft a formal notice to quit. You serve it personally or via certified mail. They have 30 days to vacate voluntarily. If they refuse, we file with the court for forcible removal. Given the complete lack of any rental agreement, judges typically rule quickly on these cases. What about my other assets, my business, my savings? I don't want either son getting anything when I'm gone. They've made it clear they see me as a resource, not a father. Thompson closed the property code and leaned back in his chair. That's where an irrevocable trust becomes invaluable. We transfer your assets, house, business interests, savings accounts, everything into a trust managed by a professional trustee. You maintain complete control during your lifetime. But after death, distribution follows your exact instructions. Harder to challenge than a will. Nearly impossible if structured correctly. A will can be contested on dozens of grounds. People claim undue influence, mental incompetence, family pressure, all sorts of arguments that can tie up estates for years. A properly executed, irrevocable trust established while you're clearly competent and acting of your own free will. That's a completely different legal standard. I sat back in the leather chair, feeling lighter than I had since this nightmare began. How soon can we start? Thompson smiled slightly, the first real emotion he'd shown since I'd entered his office. Today, if you're ready, I'll need you to sign an engagement agreement outlining my fees and the scope of work. For eviction notices, complete trust creation, and comprehensive asset protection, my total fee will be $6,500. I'd spent $35,000 on a fraudulent wedding. Another $28,000 had been collected by my son and his accomplice wife, thousands more over 4 years supporting Howard and Beverly's parasitic lifestyle. That's acceptable. Thompson pulled documents from his desk drawer with practiced efficiency. Engagement agreement, detailed fee structure, timeline estimates for each phase of the legal work. We'll have the eviction notices drafted and ready by Friday morning. I recommend you serve them personally rather than using certified mail. Personal service eliminates any question about receipt and starts the 30-day clock immediately. And the trust? 2 to 3 weeks for complete asset transfer. I'll work directly with your financial institutions, coordinate with your business accountant, handle all the paperwork. We'll need current statements for all accounts, property deeds, business ownership documents, insurance policies. He slid the contract across his desk. I read it carefully, years of business experience having taught me never to sign anything without understanding every clause. Scope of work, payment schedule, confidentiality provisions, timeline expectations, everything Thompson had promised, formalized in clear legal language. I signed with a steady hand. Thompson countersigned, dated the documents, handed me copies in a manila envelope. Mr. Miller, I should mention something important. This course of action will likely destroy your relationship with your sons permanently. Once you serve those eviction notices, once they discover the trust structure, there's no walking this back. You need to be prepared for that reality, I know. Are you prepared for that outcome? I thought about Howard's laugh during yesterday's phone call. Eugene's cold calculation while discussing his fraudulent marriage, playing devoted husband. Easiest $28,000 I ever made. They destroyed the relationship themselves, Mr. Thompson. I'm just acknowledging reality and protecting what I built from people who see me as a resource rather than a father. Thompson nodded with the understanding of someone who'd seen family relationships destroyed by greed more times than he cared to count. Then we're clear on the path forward. I'll call you Friday morning when the eviction documents are ready. We shook hands again, longer this time, professional respect passing between two men who understood the difference between sentiment and strategy. I left his office with copies of the contract, timeline outline, and trust structure summary, legal documents that meant one simple thing: I was taking my life back. The elevator down moved faster than the ride up, gravity working in my favor. In the parking garage, I sat in my truck with the contract copies on the passenger seat and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: control, purpose. The satisfaction of a plan beginning to take shape. My phone buzzed. Text message from Eugene. Dad, did you think about the down payment? We really need an answer. The house won't wait forever, and Patricia's getting anxious about missing this opportunity. I looked at the message for a long moment. $25,000 for a house he'd live in for 3 months before filing for divorce. $25,000 to fund his escape plan with Rebecca, the married woman from Nancy's photographs. I deleted the text without responding. Then I started the truck and headed home. Howard and Beverly would be there, comfortable and confident, expecting nothing to change. They had 30 days left to enjoy that confidence. I had 30 days to prepare for war. The drive home took me through neighborhoods I'd watched develop over 3 decades of living in Phoenix. Strip malls where citrus groves used to stretch toward the mountains. Housing developments carved from desert that had been empty when I'd first started Miller Hardware. I'd built something real here. 3 stores, 15 employees, a reputation for honest dealing and quality service. Contractors knew they could trust Miller Hardware for reliable supplies and fair prices. Homeowners came to us when they needed advice, not just products. 30 years of showing up every day, solving problems, treating customers and employees with respect. Building something that mattered, something that would outlast me. Howard and Beverly thought they could bleed it dry through manipulation. Eugene thought he could claim it through inheritance after treating me like a fool. They were all wrong. The house looked peaceful when I pulled into my driveway. Same stucco exterior I'd maintained carefully over the years. Same landscaping I'd designed to be beautiful but drought-resistant. Same guest house I'd built with such hope for the future. I sat in my truck for a moment, looking at that guest house where Howard and Beverly lived rent-free while plotting to extend their exploitation indefinitely. Windows open to catch the afternoon breeze, air conditioning I paid for, utilities I covered, comfort I provided, while they showed me nothing but entitlement in return. 30 days, Thompson's words echoed in my mind. Personal service to eliminate any question about receipt. The 30-day clock starting immediately. I grabbed the manila envelope containing my copies of the legal documents and headed inside. The house felt different already, like I was seeing it through the eyes of someone who understood his own power rather than someone who accepted being used. From the guest house, I could hear Beverly's voice, probably on another video call about spa weekends and shopping trips funded by my generosity. Howard's truck sat in the driveway. Another repair bill waiting to happen, another request for money that would come with guilt and manipulation. Friday morning, Thompson would call when the eviction notices were ready. Then this house would truly be mine again, and my sons would learn what happened when they mistook kindness for weakness. The envelopes arrived Friday morning, exactly as Thompson had promised. Heavy paper, official seals, legal documents that would change everything. I set them on my desk and stared at them for most of the day, feeling the weight of what they represented. By evening, I was ready. I could hear Howard and Beverly in the guest house, their voices carrying through the open windows as they discussed some new scheme. Howard's tone was excited, animated, the sound of a man who thought he had everything figured out. I picked up the envelopes and walked across the yard to their door. The Arizona heat was finally breaking as the sun set behind the mountains, but I felt cold inside, focused with the clarity that comes from finally understanding the truth about people you thought you loved. I knocked firmly on the door, 3 sharp raps that echoed across the quiet evening. Howard answered, smiling with that easy confidence I'd mistaken for charm for too many years. "Hey, Dad. Perfect timing. Beverly and I were just talking about that food truck idea I mentioned. Phoenix has a great market for specialty sandwiches, and we've been researching locations. Initial investment would be around $15,000, Beverly called from inside, but the profit margins are incredible. We could pay you back in 6 months, maybe less." I placed the envelopes in Howard's hands without a word. He looked down at them, puzzled, still smiling like this was some kind of gift. "What's this?" "Official eviction notice. You have 30 days to find other housing." The words landed like stones thrown into still water. Ripples of silence spread outward, broken only by the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Howard tore open his envelope, his smile fading as he read the legal heading. Behind him, Beverly appeared in the doorway, grabbed her own envelope with trembling hands. "Have you lost your mind?" Howard's voice cracked on the last word. "This is our home. We live here. This is family. This is my house," I said calmly. "You've lived here 4 years without paying rent, without contributing anything except demands and disrespect. Time to grow up." Beverly's face went white as she scanned the legal document. "You can't just throw us out like we're strangers. I'm practically your daughter-in-law. Practically doesn't pay rent. Practically doesn't clean up after itself. Practically doesn't show gratitude for 4 years of free housing." Howard stepped toward me, fists clenched, face reddening with the kind of anger that comes from having your sense of entitlement challenged. "We're family. You can't just kick us out because you're having some kind of midlife crisis. The notice is legal, 30 days. I suggest you start packing." Beverly grabbed my arm with desperate fingers. "Leonard, please, we can work this out. We'll start paying rent. We'll help around the house. I removed her hand gently but firmly. "You've had 4 years to think about contributing. 30 days. Howard's voice rose to a shout. "Everyone will know what kind of father you are. Throwing out your own son, your customers, your neighbors. Everyone will know." I turned toward my house without responding. Behind me, Beverly started crying loud theatrical sobs that had worked on me for years. Howard's curses followed me across the yard, creative combinations of profanity that would have embarrassed his mother. I walked into my house, closed the door, and locked it with an audible click that seemed to echo through the evening air. The chaos erupted immediately. Howard pounding on my front door, Beverly wailing about heartless fathers and family loyalty. Through the windows, I could see them pacing around the guest house like caged animals, phones pressed to their ears. 10 minutes later, the shouting subsided into intense whispered conversations. Beverly on her phone, gesturing wildly. Howard on his pacing back and forth across their small patio. Then I heard Beverly's voice pitched high enough to carry across the yard. "Eugene, he gave us eviction papers. 30 days. I don't know what happened. He just changed, like we were nothing to him." Eugene's response was too quiet for me to hear, but Beverly's half of the conversation told me everything I needed to know. "We need help. Can you talk to him? Maybe if it comes from you, he'll listen to reason." More conversation I couldn't catch tomorrow. "Yes, bring Patricia. Maybe if he sees you're both concerned, he'll realize he's making a mistake." After the call ended, I heard them talking strategy through the thin walls of the guest house. Plans to involve Eugene, appeals to family loyalty, threats to tell everyone in town what kind of man would throw out his own son. I opened my laptop and reviewed Thompson's trust documents that had arrived by email that afternoon. Asset protection strategy, transfer procedures, timeline for complete financial security. They thought this was about the guest house and 30 days notice. They had no idea I was protecting everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Eugene. "Dad," Howard called. "We need to talk. Coming over tomorrow with Patricia." This has gone too far. I read it twice without responding. They were regrouping, coordinating their counterattack. Eugene would arrive with his fake wife, put on a performance of concerned family members trying to help their confused father see reason. Let them come. I pulled up my calendar and marked the date. Day 1 of 30. The clock had started ticking, and every tick brought me closer to freedom. Outside my office window, the guest house lights were still on. Howard and Beverly probably planning their next move, maybe calling other relatives, maybe researching tenant rights they didn't actually have. 30 days left to enjoy their sense of entitlement. 30 days for me to prepare for whatever desperate measures they'd try when they realized this wasn't a negotiation. Saturday morning brought the first wave of psychological warfare. I came downstairs to find Beverly sprawled across my living room couch, still in her bathrobe at 10 a.m., one hand pressed dramatically to her forehead. "Leonard," her voice was weak, theatrical, pitched to carry maximum emotional impact. "I can't get up. My heart is racing. The stress from this eviction notice, the shock of being thrown out of our home, I think you should call a doctor. Howard hovered nearby in protective stance, arms crossed, watching my reaction like a scientist studying lab rats. Both of them had clearly rehearsed this performance, probably stayed up half the night planning their opening move. I walked past them to the kitchen without comment. "There's aspirin in the bathroom cabinet," I said over my shoulder. Behind me, stunned silence. Then Beverly's frustrated exhale, the sound of someone whose opening gambit had failed completely. I poured coffee and carried it to my office. Closed the door and listened to their whispered recalibration through the thin walls. Sunday afternoon brought Eugene's arrival. I heard his BMW in the driveway, then voices in the guest house as he coordinated with Howard and Beverly. 20 minutes of strategy session before the doorbell rang. Eugene stood on my front step with Patricia beside him, both dressed for church, although I knew they hadn't attended services in months. Serious expressions, united front, the kind of presentation that suggested careful planning. "Dad, we need to talk." I let them in, noting how they positioned themselves in my living room. Patricia on the couch, Eugene in the chair closest to me, body language suggesting intervention rather than conversation. "Dad, this situation with Howard has gotten completely out of hand." Eugene's voice carried the measured tones of a man accustomed to selling insurance policies to reluctant customers. "I understand you're frustrated with the living arrangement, but eviction, that's extreme, is it?" I settled into my chair, hands folded calmly. He's 31 years old, he's lived here 4 years without paying rent. When exactly should he become independent? Patricia leaned forward, her expression a masterpiece of concerned sympathy. "Leonard Howard made mistakes, but family supports each other through difficult times. Maybe there's a compromise we can work out." "What kind of compromise?" Eugene pulled out his phone, swiped to a notes app, showed me a carefully typed proposal. "Howard pays $500 monthly rent. Beverly gets a part-time job to contribute. They help with house maintenance and yard work. Everybody wins." I looked at their detailed negotiation, noting the specific dollar amounts, the timeline, the carefully worded responsibilities. They'd spent hours crafting this, probably with legal advice from someone who didn't understand the real situation. "Why now?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Why didn't Howard offer this arrangement 4 years ago? Or 3 years ago? Or even last month? People change, Leonard." Patricia's voice carried the kind of gentle patience usually reserved for children or elderly relatives. Personal growth takes time. Howard's finally ready to step up and take responsibility. 30 days is plenty of time for him to find an apartment and demonstrate that responsibility to a landlord who doesn't share his DNA. Eugene's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Dad, you're being unreasonable. Howard needs family support right now, not abandonment. And frankly, this house is getting pretty big for you to manage alone. Maybe it's time to think about downsizing." There it was. The real agenda, delivered with practiced smoothness. Downsizing. "A nice condo somewhere," Patricia continued, tag-teaming like they'd rehearsed this conversation. "Less maintenance, lower utility bills, more security. You could help Howard and Beverly get started in their own place, help Eugene and me with our house fund. Everybody benefits from a change." I stood up slowly, recognizing the coordinated manipulation for what it was. They wanted me to sell the house, split the proceeds among family members, reduce myself to a smaller space while funding their lifestyle upgrades. "Thank you for your concern about my living situation. The eviction notice stands." Eugene stood too, his mask of reasonableness slipping slightly. "Dad, you're making a serious mistake. Family is everything. You can't just cut people off because you're going through some kind of crisis." "You're right," I said, walking them toward the front door. "Family is everything. That's why this hurts so much." They left confused and frustrated, their carefully planned intervention having accomplished nothing except revealing the full scope of their coordination. I walked to the guest house and knocked on the door. Howard answered, hopeful expression suggesting he thought Eugene had talked sense into me. "Pack your things," I said. "You have 27 days left." The third week brought escalation and desperation. Howard alternated between sullen silence and explosive anger. Beverly cycled through different manipulation tactics daily. Tears, medical emergencies, threats, bargaining, guilt trips, and appeals to neighbors. I maintained my routine with mechanical precision. Work, home, office, meals alone, their presence became background noise, like living near a construction site where you eventually stop hearing the machinery. Wednesday evening brought a new wrinkle. Eugene arrived with a woman I didn't recognize, mid-40s, professional attire, clipboard in her hand. "Dad, this is Dr. Sandra Morrison. She's a family counselor. We thought it might help if we could all sit down and talk through this situation with professional guidance." I remained standing, arms crossed. I didn't agree to any counseling session. The woman smiled with practiced warmth. "Mr. Miller, your son is concerned about recent behavioral changes, sudden major decisions, cutting off family members. These can sometimes indicate underlying stress or depression that might benefit from professional perspective. You can stop right there. I look directly at Eugene. Get out. Both of you, now, Dad, she's trying to help. If you just listen, this is my house. You're leaving, both of you. They left, Eugene slamming his car door hard enough to set off the alarm. That evening, Howard cornered me in the garage, blocking my path to the house with his body. You know what people will say, right? Howard's voice carried a threatening edge I'd never heard before, aggressive and desperate. His face was too close to mine, invading my personal space in a way that felt deliberately intimidating, that you threw out your own son. Your neighbors, your customers at the hardware stores, everyone in this community will know what kind of father you really are. I checked my watch without stepping back. You have 18 days left. We're not going anywhere. He planted his feet wider, blocking more of the doorway. You think you can just kick us out like we're strangers? After everything we've done for this family? Everything you've done? I looked at him directly. Like what? Name one thing you've contributed in 4 years besides demands and disrespect. His jaw worked like he was chewing words too bitter to swallow. We kept you company. We made this place feel like a home instead of some lonely old man's empty house. Then the sheriff will help you pack. He didn't move. We stood there for 30 seconds that felt like an hour, his fists clenched, face reddening with the kind of anger that comes from realizing intimidation wasn't working. Finally, he stepped aside. I walked into my house and immediately called Thompson's office, leaving a message about the confrontation. Documentation. Everything needed to be documented now. 2 days later, I found my coffee maker shattered on the kitchen floor. Howard lounged at my table, newspaper spread in front of him like he was enjoying a peaceful morning. Oh, that he shrugged when he saw me looking at the pieces. Slipped out of my hands this morning. Accidents happen when people are stressed about their living situations. I swept up the glass without comment. 16 days, I said, dumping the pieces into the trash with deliberate calm that afternoon. I heard Beverly talking to Mrs. Patterson over the back fence. Our neighbor for 15 years, a widow who'd always been kind but kept to herself mostly. I watched from my office window as Beverly performed for her audience. Tissue dabbing at her eyes, dramatic gestures, voice pitched to carry maximum emotional impact. He's throwing us out with nowhere to go, Beverly was saying, her voice carrying across both yards. I don't know what's gotten into Leonard. It's like he's not the same person anymore. Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot. I'm sure you and Leonard will work things out, dear. Family disagreements happen. I don't know, Mrs. Patterson. He's changed so much. Maybe it's his age, maybe it's the stress of being alone in that big house. But he's not thinking clearly. The things he's saying, the way he's acting, it's like he's having some kind of breakdown. I turned away from the window, let her perform for the neighbors, let her plant seeds about my mental state. It changed nothing about the legal reality of their situation. That evening, I came home from the hardware store to find my office door slightly ajar. I always closed it completely, had for years. On my desk, the trust documents Thompson had sent sat exactly where I'd left them. Almost exactly. The corner of one page was bent differently. Someone had been through my papers. Howard or Beverly, maybe both. They knew now about the trust, about the asset protection, about the full scope of what I was doing. The next few days brought a different kind of energy to the house, quieter desperation, more whispered phone calls, less dramatic confrontation, more strategic planning. I could feel them watching me differently, calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much damage I could do to their futures. Day 12 brought Beverly to my office door in the afternoon. She knocked this time, waited for permission to enter. Howard wasn't with her. Leonard, can we talk? Just the two of us. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat down with tissue already in hand, eyes red from what might have been genuine crying or carefully applied irritation. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about how Howard and I have been living here, how we've treated this situation. Her voice was softer than I'd heard it in months, vulnerable in a way that felt calculated. You were right about some things. We did take advantage of your generosity. I waited, saying nothing. I've made mistakes, we both have, but I want to change, Leonard. I want to be the person you deserve to have in your family. She leaned forward, hands clasped in her lap. I could get a job, start contributing to expenses. I could help around the house more, show you the respect you deserve, be like a real daughter to you. The performance was flawless. Every gesture, every pause, every catch in her voice designed to trigger my protective instincts and parental guilt. Years of practice had made her an expert at this particular manipulation. I let the silence stretch, watching her carefully. Really watching her, not the image she wanted me to see. If you'd truly realized your mistakes, Beverly, you wouldn't have come here asking for forgiveness as a transaction. You'd have come without expecting anything in return except the right to apologize. Her expression flickered, mask slipping just for a moment. But you're not apologizing, you're negotiating. You want me to believe Howard corrupted you, that you're a victim of his bad influence. But I heard you on the phone with Eugene, laughing about manipulating me, planning how to extend your free ride indefinitely. Her face changed completely. Tears stopped, voice went cold and hard. Fine, fine. You want to be a bitter old man living alone? Be alone, but don't expect us to care what happens to you when you're old and sick and need help. I didn't react to the threat. 10 days, Beverly. Start packing. She turned and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Through the ceiling, I heard her stomping upstairs to the guest house, Howard's voice questioning, then Beverly's angry response. Words muffled but tone clear. She was telling him the manipulation had failed, that I wouldn't cave to emotional appeals. The final week brought frantic activity and increasingly desperate measures. Moving truck estimates appeared on the kitchen counter, apartment rental applications scattered across their coffee table, reality finally breaking through 4 years of comfortable delusion. Eugene called twice that week. I let both go to voicemail. Dad, this is insane. You're destroying this family over what? Some need to control everyone. Call me back. We can fix this. Dad, I talked to a lawyer about elder abuse and financial exploitation. What you're doing might not be as legal as you think. Call me before you make this situation worse. I deleted both messages and made a note to mention the threats to Thompson. Day 3 brought Beverly's final desperate gambit, medical emergency, real ambulance in my driveway, real paramedics checking her vital signs while she claimed chest pains and breathing difficulties. The stress of this eviction, she gasped to the paramedics. I can't handle being thrown out of my home. My heart feels like it's going to explode. The paramedics were thorough, professional, skeptical. They'd seen this type of call before. Blood pressure normal, heart rate slightly elevated but within normal range, no signs of actual medical emergency. Ma'am, we'd recommend you see your regular doctor about stress management, but there's no indication of immediate cardiac distress. Beverly refused transport to the hospital. $800 ambulance bill, she announced after they left. Hope you're proud of yourself, Leonard. Day 2 brought the beginning of their actual move, Howard's truck loaded with garbage bags and cardboard boxes. 4 years of comfortable living reduced to whatever would fit in a vehicle barely running on borrowed time. Their possessions looked pathetic in the harsh afternoon sunlight. Cheap furniture, electronics that had seen better days, clothes stuffed into contractor bags. The accumulated detritus of people who'd never built anything, never saved anything, never planned beyond their next request for money. I watched from my office window as they carried load after load to the truck, both of them moving with the defeated posture of people whose bluff had been called and found wanting. Day 1, the final day, Howard knocked on my door one last time, Beverly standing behind him with red eyes and defiant expression. Last chance, old man. Howard's voice carried exhaustion more than anger now. You really want to do this to your own son? I looked at him standing on my doorstep. 31 years old, my youngest boy, I'd taught him to ride a bike in this very driveway, helped him with homework at the kitchen table, cheered at his baseball games and high school graduation. Now he stood here treating me like an obstacle to his comfort rather than the father who'd raised him. You stopped being my son when you started seeing me as a bank account, I said quietly. You're a tenant who's been evicted. Your lease expired 4 years ago. I closed the door and waited. Day 30 arrived with the sound of vehicles in my driveway. 9 a.m. sharp. Deputy Martinez from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, professional and prepared. Thompson's car following close behind. We'd coordinated this carefully. Official, legal, no room for argument or last-minute manipulation. Mr. Miller, Deputy Martinez shook my hand with the firm grip of someone who'd handled these situations many times. Let's get this done properly. Thompson joined us with his briefcase, legal documents that made everything official and unassailable. Everything's in order. The eviction notice was properly served. The 30 days have elapsed. They're officially trespassing now. We walked to the guest house together. My property, my rights, my boundaries finally being enforced by people who understood the law better than Howard understood manipulation. I knocked on the door anyway. 3 firm knocks, one last courtesy. Silence. Then Howard's voice muffled and defeated. Go away, you can't do this. Martinez stepped forward, hand resting casually on his duty belt. Sir, this is Deputy Martinez with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. I'm here to enforce a legal eviction order. Open the door now, or I'll be forced to open it myself. Refusing to comply makes this criminal trespass. Your choice. A long pause, whispered argument inside. Then the door cracked open and Howard's face appeared, unshaven, angry, but clearly understanding he'd run out of options. Martinez pushed the door wider and entered with professional authority. Thompson and I followed. The guest house looked like a disaster zone. Clothes scattered everywhere, pizza boxes stacked on tables, beer cans covering every surface. Chaos and filth, but no packed boxes ready to go. They hadn't been planning to leave voluntarily. You folks weren't planning on leaving today, were you? Martinez surveyed the mess, making notes on his official forms. Beverly emerged from the bedroom, hair uncombed, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. We need more time. We can't just disappear overnight. Ma'am, you've had 30 days. That's more time than the law requires. Martinez checked his watch. You now have 2 hours to collect personal belongings. That means clothes, personal items, nothing that belongs to the property owner. Clock starts now, 2 hours. Beverly's voice pitched high with genuine panic. We can't possibly pack everything in 2 hours. You should have started packing 30 days ago, ma'am. What followed was chaos in slow motion. Beverly frantically stuffing clothes into garbage bags, crying intermittently between bursts of manic activity. Howard throwing things into duffel bags with aggressive movements, muttering curses under his breath that grew louder with each passing minute. After everything we did for him, Howard said loudly enough for everyone to hear, his voice carrying the bitter edge of someone whose worldview was collapsing. Living in this huge place alone like some kind of hermit, we kept him company for 4 years. Martinez's voice sharpened. Sir, this is Mr. Miller's property. I suggest you focus on packing and keep your comments to yourself. I stood in the doorway, watching them dismantle their unauthorized residency piece by piece. 4 years of treating my guest house like their personal kingdom, reduced to whatever would fit in garbage bags and cardboard boxes. Beverly tried catching my eye multiple times, cycling through her entire manipulation playbook one final time. Tears, pleading looks, dramatic sighs, appeals to shared memories. I'd seen it all before, understood every technique wasn't falling for any of it. Leonard, please, she said during a break from packing. Think about what you're doing. We're family. This isn't who you are. I didn't respond. Thompson had advised me to document everything, say nothing that could be twisted later in court or in the community gossip network they'd been trying to weaponize against me. An hour into the process, Eugene's BMW pulled into my driveway. I watched through the window as he parked and sat in his car for several minutes, probably gathering courage or rehearsing whatever final appeal he'd planned. He knocked on my front door, not the guest house. Smart. He wanted to talk to me away from Howard and Beverly's chaos. Dad, I just heard what's happening. This is insane. I opened the door but didn't invite him inside. The eviction is legal and final. Legal doesn't make it right. These are desperate people you're putting on the street. They're 31 and 29 years old. They've had 4 years to figure out independence. Eugene's expression shifted, becoming more calculating. What's this really about? Because if it's money, if you need them to contribute more, we can work something out. I could help them with rent payments until they get on their feet. Interesting offer. Eugene volunteering to help financially, right when he was supposedly saving for a house down payment and planning his divorce in 3 months. They've had their chance, multiple chances. Dad, think about how this looks. You're a respected businessman in this community. People are going to ask questions about why you threw out your own son. The threat was subtle but clear. My reputation, my standing in the business community, my relationships with customers and suppliers, all hanging in the balance of public opinion about family loyalty. People can ask whatever questions they want. The law is on my side. Eugene stepped closer, lowering his voice. Is this about Patricia and me? About the house down payment? Because if you're upset that we're moving forward with our lives, making adult decisions, we can slow down the timeline. He was fishing, trying to understand what had triggered my sudden transformation from compliant father to boundary-enforcing property owner. No mention of Nancy's photographs, no acknowledgement of the overheard phone conversation, just confusion about why his reliable financial resource had suddenly become unreliable. This is about Howard and Beverly overstaying their welcome by 4 years. I could talk to them, set up a payment plan, behavioral expectations, consequences for not meeting standards, give them one more chance to prove they can be responsible. Behind him, I could see Martinez and Thompson waiting patiently by the guest house, giving me space to handle family dynamics while maintaining professional oversight of the eviction process. The decision is final, Eugene. His mask slipped slightly, revealing the irritation underneath his concerned son performance. You're making a mistake. Family is supposed to support each other, not abandon each other over money. You're right about family supporting each other. That's exactly what I've been doing for 4 years. Now it's time for Howard to support himself. I closed the door and returned to the guest house, where the packing frenzy continued with increasing desperation. 2 hours later, they were loading the last bags into Howard's truck. The old Ford sat low on its springs, overloaded with everything they'd accumulated during their 4-year residency. Boxes strapped to the roof, garbage bags stuffed into every available space. At the truck, Beverly turned for one final appeal. "You'll regret this, Leonard. When you're old and alone and need help, don't come crying to us." I met her eyes, calm and certain. "I won't." Howard climbed into the driver's seat without looking at me. The truck started on the third try, engine coughing and smoking like it might not make it to the end of the driveway. They drove away slowly, the overloaded truck struggling with its burden, leaving behind 4 years of demands and manipulation and entitlement. I stood in my driveway as the sound of their departure faded, replaced by the normal quiet of a Tuesday afternoon in Paradise Valley. My house truly mine for the first time since Howard had moved into the guest house with his promises of temporary residency. Martinez handed me official paperwork. "They're out, Mr. Miller. If they return without your permission, that's criminal trespass. Call immediately. Thank you, Deputy." Thompson shook my hand. "Well done, Leonard. Most people cave under family pressure long before it gets to this point. You held your ground." After they left, I walked through the guest house slowly, documenting the damage they'd left behind. Stains on the carpet, holes in the walls, broken fixtures they'd never reported. The cost of 4 years of careless living added to 4 years of free rent and utilities. But it was mine again. All of it. The house, the guest house, the quiet, the peace. The right to make decisions about my own property without guilt or manipulation. That evening, my phone rang. Eugene's number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Dad, I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed this family over what? Some power trip. Howard and Beverly are staying in a motel tonight because you couldn't find it in your heart to show basic human compassion. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults." I deleted the message and made myself dinner. Leftover roast beef, vegetables from my garden, quiet music from the radio. Simple pleasures I'd forgotten during 4 years of chaos and constant demands. 3 days later, Eugene called again. "Dad, this is getting ridiculous. Howard's living situation is unsustainable. You need to reconsider this eviction before it becomes permanent damage to our family relationships." I didn't call back. Thompson had been clear about maintaining boundaries once they were established. Every concession would be seen as weakness, every compromise as an opening for renewed manipulation. A week passed. Then Eugene showed up unannounced, Patricia beside him, both carrying the kind of serious expressions that suggested they'd been planning this intervention for days. "Dad, we need to talk, really talk, not just exchange ultimatums." I let them into my living room but remained standing. "You have 10 minutes. Eugene settled onto the couch like he was preparing for a lengthy negotiation. "This situation with Howard has gotten completely out of control. I understand you felt taken advantage of, but throwing him out was extreme. Now you need to think about repairing the damage." "What kind of repair?" Patricia leaned forward with her practiced, concerned expression. "Howard's learned his lesson. He's working now, has a job at an auto parts store. He and Beverly are trying to be responsible, but they need help getting back on their feet. They've had 4 years to get on their feet." Eugene's voice took on the patient tone he probably used with difficult insurance customers. "People make mistakes, Dad. But permanent exile from the family isn't the answer. Maybe you could help them with first month's rent and security deposit somewhere decent. Give them a fresh start." I looked at my eldest son, sitting in my living room, asking me to fund another chapter of Howard's irresponsibility while planning his own fraudulent divorce in less than 3 months. Before we discuss Howard's future, there's something else we need to address. I walked to my office and returned with the manila folder I'd been carrying since my first meeting with Thompson, set it on the coffee table between us. "What's this?" Eugene picked it up, suspicious. "Open it." He pulled out the first photograph. Nancy's image of him kissing Rebecca on the hotel balcony, timestamp clearly visible in the corner, 2 hours and 15 minutes before his wedding ceremony. Patricia gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Eugene's face went white. "Where did you get this?" "The wedding photographer found them by accident. There are 7 photos total, all with GPS coordinates and timestamps that would hold up in any court." Eugene's hands shook slightly as he flipped through the remaining photos, his confident facade cracking with each image. "Dad, this isn't what it looks like. It looks like you were having an affair with a married woman hours before your wedding to Patricia." Patricia stood abruptly, her practiced composure completely gone. "You bastard. You absolute bastard. I knew something was wrong, but I trusted you. I actually trusted you." Eugene reached for her hand. "Patricia, let me explain." She jerked away from his touch. "Explain what?" "How you made a fool of me in front of everyone we know. How you lied during our entire engagement." I pulled out my notebook and read from the conversation I'd overheard. Quote, 3 more months of playing devoted husband, then Patricia files for divorce. Half the wedding gifts are legally mine. We already worked out the 60-40 split, end quote. Patricia's eyes widened as the full scope of the deception hit her. You planned this. The whole marriage was fake. Patricia, it's not that simple. The bank records show you opened a joint account 6 weeks before the wedding, I continued, specifically to collect and manage wedding gifts. This was premeditated fraud from the beginning. Eugene stood, pacing to the window, running his hands through his hair. You don't understand the complexities of adult relationships, Dad. Sometimes people have to make difficult choices, like choosing to steal $33,000 from wedding guests who believed they were celebrating a real marriage. He spun around, anger replacing his attempts at explanation. Those were gifts freely given. No one forced anyone to contribute, under false pretenses. You and Patricia both knew you were planning divorce before the ceremony even happened. Patricia was crying now, not the manipulative tears I'd seen from Beverly, but genuine anguish at discovering the depth of Eugene's betrayal. How long, she whispered. How long have you been planning to leave me? Eugene's silence was answer enough. I pulled out the flash drive and set it beside the photos. Everything's here. Photos, metadata, bank records, recorded conversations. I've already given copies to my attorney. What do you want? Eugene's voice had lost all pretense of warmth or family affection. Money? Silence? What's your price for keeping this quiet? I don't want anything from you, Eugene. I want you to understand that I know exactly who you are now. Patricia wiped her eyes and stood. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, and I'm keeping every penny of those wedding gifts since the marriage was fraudulent from your side. You can't do that. Arizona law doesn't protect fraud, Eugene. She grabbed her purse. I hope your girlfriend was worth it. She left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Eugene turned back to me, his mask completely gone now. You've destroyed everything. Are you happy? My marriage, my reputation, my future, all gone because you couldn't mind your own business. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending I didn't notice the destruction you caused. Eugene stared at me for a long moment, his face cycling through emotions I'd never seen from him before. Rage, desperation, calculation, and something that might have been fear. We can work this out, he said finally, his voice taking on the desperate edge of a salesman losing a big commission. Obviously, there were problems in my marriage, but that doesn't affect our relationship. Father and son. That's what matters here, is it? Of course it is. Look, Patricia's upset now, but she'll calm down. We can probably work out some kind of settlement that doesn't involve lawyers or public scandal. Keep this in the family. I sat back down in my chair, studying my eldest son as he attempted to salvage something from the wreckage of his schemes. What about Rebecca? His face tightened. What about her, the married woman you were kissing hours before your wedding? What happens to her when Patricia exposes your affair? Rebecca's situation is complicated. Her marriage was already having problems. What she and I have is real, unlike the business arrangement Patricia and I had. Business arrangement. He'd finally said it out loud. So the wedding was a business transaction. Eugene began pacing again, unable to sit still as the walls closed around him. Adult relationships are complex, Dad. Sometimes people have to make practical decisions about financial security while pursuing emotional fulfillment elsewhere. $33,000 worth of practical decisions. Those gifts were freely given to celebrate what people thought was a happy occasion. We provided that occasion, everyone got what they wanted. The casual sociopathy of it took my breath away. He genuinely believed he'd done nothing wrong, that providing a fake wedding experience justified stealing money from people who'd trusted him. What about Howard? Was his situation part of your practical decision-making too? Eugene stopped pacing. What do you mean? The phone conversation I overheard? You and Howard coordinating your schemes. His parasitic living arrangement designed to distract me from your marriage fraud. His expression went carefully blank. I don't know what you think you heard. Quote, keep him distracted. Make him think you need something big, so when I ask for the house down payment, it won't seem excessive. End quote. Eugene's shoulders sagged slightly. The last of his pretenses crumbling as he realized the full scope of what I knew. You were recording private conversations. I was listening to my own property when voices carried through open windows. Nothing illegal about that. He sat back down, head in his hands. How long have you known? Since the day after Howard called you from the guest house, since I learned about the joint bank account, since Nancy showed me the photographs. And you've been planning this whole time. The eviction, the confrontation, all of it. I've been protecting myself and my assets from people who see me as a resource instead of a father. Eugene looked up and I saw something new in his expression. Not anger or desperation, but genuine curiosity. Assets? Dad, what are you talking about? I walked back to my office and returned with another folder. Thompson's trust documentation, asset protection strategy, complete financial restructuring. Irrevocable trust, I said, setting the papers in front of him. Everything I own, the business, this house, my savings accounts, all of it transferred to professional management. Eugene grabbed the documents, scanning through legal language he probably didn't fully understand. What does this mean? It means when I die, you get the minimum required by Arizona law. Not a penny more. The rest goes to charities that help people who actually need assistance, not people who take advantage of family relationships. His face went white as the implications sank in. You can't do this. I'm your son. Being my son means something different to me than it does to you, Dad, please. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. I can make things right with Patricia, pay back the wedding money, start over clean with what money? Rebecca's husband is going to divorce her when this comes out. Patricia's filing tomorrow and keeping the wedding gifts as compensation for fraud. Your income as an insurance agent won't cover the lifestyle you've been planning. Eugene stood abruptly, pacing again with increasing agitation. This is insane. You're destroying your entire family over what? Money, pride. I'm protecting what I built from people who plan to steal it. Steal it, we're your sons. Everything you have should go to your children anyway. Should it, based on what? Your respect for me, your contribution to my success, your gratitude for 30 years of providing for you? He had no answer for that. Let me ask you something, Eugene. In your practical adult relationship philosophy, what did you plan to do with your share of my inheritance? What do you mean? When I died, when you inherited half of everything, what were your plans? Eugene's silence stretched long enough to be an answer by itself. House in North Scottsdale with Rebecca. Investment portfolio to support the lifestyle you felt you deserved. Maybe a business venture that would let you feel successful without actually building anything. There's nothing wrong with financial planning. There's everything wrong with planning to profit from your father's death while showing him nothing but manipulation and disrespect while he's alive. I gathered up the trust documents and the photographs. The legal work is complete, Eugene. The 30-day eviction period is over. Your marriage is finished. Your inheritance is protected from people who see it as an entitlement rather than a gift. What am I supposed to do now? What you should have been doing all along. Build your own life with your own effort instead of scheming to take what other people built. He stared at me for a moment longer, then walked to the front door. You'll regret this, he said without turning around. When you're old and alone and need family, remember that you chose this isolation. I'll remember that I chose honesty over manipulation. That's a choice I can live with. The door closed behind him with a finality that seemed to echo through the house. I stood in my living room, surrounded by the quiet I'd been fighting to reclaim for weeks, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not happiness, exactly, but the deep satisfaction of a man who'd finally stopped pretending that manipulation was love. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, Eugene using a different phone. Dad, I saw the photos. I know you know about Rebecca and me. Look, the whole marriage thing with Patricia was complicated, but it's over now anyway. I'm asking you to stay out of the divorce proceedings. I can make it worth your while. $10,000 to let this play out quietly. I read it twice, amazed at his continued belief that everything was negotiable, that every relationship was just another transaction waiting to happen. I deleted the text and blocked the number. An hour later, another text from yet another number. This is Rebecca. Eugene gave me your number. I know you have photos of us together. I'll pay you $20,000 to destroy them. My marriage, my children, everything depends on this staying quiet. So Rebecca had children. Eugene's affair wasn't just destroying his fraudulent marriage and my family relationships. It was threatening to tear apart another family, innocent kids who had no idea their mother was involved with a man who saw relationships as business opportunities. I deleted that message too and called Thompson. I'm receiving bribery attempts, I told him. Both Eugene and his girlfriend are offering money for my silence about the affair. Document everything, Thompson advised. Save the messages, keep records of any contact. If this escalates to harassment or threats, we'll need that evidence. The next few days brought a flood of contact attempts. Eugene called from different numbers, sent emails from various accounts, even showed up at my hardware store one afternoon. Dad, we need to talk. Not about the photos, not about the inheritance stuff, just father and son. I was behind the counter helping a contractor select bolts for a deck project. Professional territory, neutral ground where Eugene couldn't make emotional appeals without looking inappropriate. I'm working, Eugene, 5 minutes, please. The contractor looked between us, recognizing family tension but not wanting to get involved. I'll go grab a coffee and come back, he said diplomatically. Eugene waited until we were alone, then leaned across the counter with desperate intensity. I'm losing everything, Dad. Patricia filed for divorce, and she's claiming fraud. She's trying to keep all the wedding money. Rebecca's husband found out about us, and he's threatening to destroy her custody arrangement. My insurance clients are asking questions about my personal life affecting my professional judgment. What do you want me to do about it? Help me. You're my father. When your children are in trouble, you help them. I looked at my eldest son, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the wrinkled clothes, the desperate edge to his voice. For a moment, I felt the old paternal instinct to fix his problems, to provide solutions and financial resources that would make his pain go away. Then I remembered the photographs, the calculated way he'd discussed divorce timing with Howard, the casual sociopathy of calling his marriage a business arrangement. You made these choices, Eugene. You deal with the consequences. I'll lose my house, my car, my business, everything. Then you'll understand what it feels like to start over, which is something most people have to do without scamming their families first. He stood there for another moment, searching my face for any sign of the father who would have bailed him out without question just 2 weeks ago. You've changed, he said finally. You're not the same person. I'm exactly the same person. I just stopped pretending I didn't notice what you were doing to me. After he left, I called the contractor back in and finished helping him with his project. Normal business, honest transaction, mutual respect. The kind of relationships I'd built my success on, the kind I should have demanded from my own family. That evening, Patricia called. First contact since the confrontation at my house. Mr. Miller, this is Patricia. I wanted to thank you for showing me those photographs. You don't need to thank me for that. Yes, I do. I was planning to stay in that marriage for practical reasons. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have proof. You gave me the truth and the courage to act on it. Her voice was stronger than I'd heard it in months, like someone who'd been carrying a heavy weight and finally set it down. How are you handling the divorce? Better than I expected. My lawyer says Eugene's fraud gives me a strong position. I'll keep the wedding money as compensation for the deception, and he can't claim any interest in assets I had before the marriage. And Rebecca, her husband's filing too. Apparently this wasn't her first affair, just the first time she got caught with evidence. Eugene's not very good at choosing reliable partners. After she hung up, I sat in my office reviewing Thompson's latest update on the trust finalization. Every asset protected, every legal detail properly documented. My inheritance would go to organizations that helped people who actually needed assistance, not people who saw family relationships as opportunities for exploitation. Howard had called once since the eviction, leaving a rambling voicemail about how unfair life was and how he was struggling to afford basic necessities on his auto parts store salary. I deleted it without finishing the message. Beverly had sent a text asking for money to cover moving expenses. I'd blocked her number. They were learning slowly and painfully what independence actually required. What most people figured out by age 25, they were discovering in their 30s because I'd enabled their dependence for too long. My phone rang. Nancy Williams, the photographer who'd started this entire revelation with her careful honesty. Mr. Miller, I hope you don't mind me calling. I've been thinking about you, wondering how things worked out after our meeting. Relief flooded through me at the sound of her voice. Nancy Williams, the woman who'd shown me the truth when everyone else was feeding me lies, checking to see how I'd handled the revelations her photographs had triggered. Nancy, I don't mind at all. Actually, I'm glad you called. I wasn't sure if I should that day in my studio. Showing you those photos, I've thought about it constantly. I hoped I did the right thing, but I know it must have been devastating to learn the truth that way. You did the right thing, you absolutely did the right thing. Those photographs changed everything, gave me the clarity I needed to see what my family had become. And how are things now, if you don't mind me asking? I looked around my office, noting the quiet, the sense of space and calm that had replaced the constant tension of manipulation and demands. Things are good, Nancy. For the first time in years, maybe decades, things are truly good. I'm so glad to hear that. You deserve peace after what you've been through. The simple kindness in her voice, the genuine concern from someone who barely knew me but had risked awkwardness to tell me the truth, moved me more than I'd expected. Would you like to get coffee sometime? I surprised myself by asking. I'd like to thank you properly. And honestly, it would be nice to talk with someone who values honesty over convenience. I'd like that very much. How about next week? Next week sounds perfect. After we hung up, I sat in my office as the Arizona evening settled around my house. Coffee with Nancy next week. A conversation with someone who understood the importance of truth, even when it was painful. The next few weeks settled into a routine I hadn't experienced in years. Mornings at the hardware store helping contractors and homeowners with their projects. Honest work, fair prices, relationships built on mutual respect rather than exploitation. Evenings in my own home, reading in my own chair, eating meals at my own pace without background noise from the guest house or demands for money disguised as family conversation. I'd started taking guitar lessons on Wednesday evenings, something I'd always wanted to learn but never found time for during 4 years of managing Howard and Beverly's endless crises. The instructor, a patient man in his 60s who'd taught music his entire career, reminded me that it was never too late to develop new skills. Friday afternoons became volunteer time at the senior center, using my hardware expertise to fix things that had broken and help elderly residents with simple repairs. People who appreciated assistance rather than demanded it as an entitlement. People who said thank you and meant it. Eugene called once more, 3 weeks after our final confrontation. I let it go to voicemail. Dad, I know you're angry, but this has gone on long enough. Rebecca and I are getting married next month. I wanted you to hear it from me rather than through gossip. Maybe it's time to put the past behind us and start rebuilding our relationship. I deleted the message without finishing it. Eugene marrying Rebecca, the woman whose affair had contributed to destroying 2 families and traumatizing her children. Building new relationships on the wreckage of old ones, learning nothing from the consequences of his choices. Howard sent a letter in the mail, handwritten on cheap paper. Dad, I've been thinking about everything that happened. Maybe I took advantage of your generosity, but that doesn't justify throwing your son out on the street. I'm struggling to make rent, working 2 jobs just to afford basic necessities. Beverly and I had to move in with her sister because we couldn't afford our own place. Is this really what you wanted? Your son reduced to poverty because of your pride? The letter tried every manipulation technique I'd seen from him over 4 years. Guilt about his living conditions, appeals to family loyalty, suggestions that my actions were motivated by pride rather than self-preservation. I threw it away and made a note to discuss it with Thompson. Documentation of continued attempts to manipulate me into providing financial support despite the clear boundaries I'd established. Fall arrived in Phoenix with subtle changes that most people missed. Slightly cooler mornings, different quality to the light, seasonal shifts that reminded me how much time had passed since Nancy's phone call had shattered my illusions about my family. I was sitting on my patio one October evening, reading a book about woodworking and planning weekend projects, when my neighbor Mrs. Patterson approached my fence. Leonard, I hope you don't mind me saying, but you seem much more relaxed lately. More like yourself again. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I feel more like myself too. Those young people who were living in your guest house, are they doing well? Mrs. Patterson was fishing, politely trying to understand the family dynamics that had played out in her neighborhood without being intrusive. They're learning to be independent. Sometimes that takes longer than it should. She nodded with the wisdom of someone who'd raised her own children and understood the difference between helping and enabling. Independence is a gift parents give their children, even when the children don't appreciate it at the time. That conversation stayed with me as the days grew shorter and cooler. Independence as a gift rather than abandonment. Boundaries as protection rather than punishment. Truth as kindness rather than cruelty. The trust documentation was complete now. Every asset protected, every legal detail properly filed. Thompson's office had sent final confirmation that my estate would be distributed according to my wishes rather than default inheritance laws that assumed family relationships were automatically healthy and deserving. 3 stores built over 30 years, protected from people who saw them as entitlements rather than achievements. My house maintained and improved through decades of care, protected from people who treated it as free housing rather than someone's life work. My coffee meetings with Nancy had become a weekly tradition, something I looked forward to more than I'd expected. She had a photographer's eye for seeing beneath surfaces, understanding the stories people didn't tell directly. You know what I notice about you, now compared to that first day in my studio? She said during one of our Thursday afternoon conversations at a small cafe downtown. You move differently, like you're not carrying invisible weight anymore. I thought about that as I drove home through familiar neighborhoods. She was right. I moved through my days without the constant low-level tension of wondering what demand would come next, what crisis Howard would manufacture, what manipulation Eugene would attempt. The hardware stores were thriving. Without the distraction of family drama, I'd been able to focus on expanding our contractor services, improving inventory systems, developing better relationships with suppliers. Business growth that came from attention and effort rather than desperate attempts to generate cash for family bailouts. My assistant manager, Carol, had commented on the change too. You seem more engaged lately, Mr. Miller? More like you were when I first started working here 5 years ago. 5 years ago, before Howard had moved into the guest house. Before Eugene had started seeing me as a financial resource rather than a father. Before I'd accepted the role of family ATM disguised as paternal generosity. The guest house had been cleaned and repainted, restored to its original purpose as actual guest space rather than parasitic living quarters. I'd had new flooring installed, replaced the damaged fixtures. Howard and Beverly had ignored, created a space that felt welcoming rather than entitled. Maybe someday I'd have real guests. Friends visiting from out of town, perhaps grandchildren if any of my sons ever learned to build healthy relationships and started real families. For now, it stood empty and peaceful, a reminder that space could be reclaimed, that boundaries could be reestablished, that independence was possible even after years of enabling dependency. One evening in November, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Patricia, looking healthier than I'd seen her in months. "Mr. Miller, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to give you this." She handed me an envelope, thick and formal. "Divorce papers, final decree. It's done. Eugene didn't contest anything after the fraud evidence came out. I kept all the wedding money as compensation for damages, and he had no claim to any of my premarital assets. How are you doing with all of this?" "Better than I thought possible. I've moved back in with my parents temporarily while I look for my own place. I'm starting law school in January, something I always wanted to do before I got distracted by trying to make Eugene's schemes work. Law school. Building her own career instead of enabling someone else's manipulations. What about Eugene and Rebecca?" Patricia's expression hardened slightly. "They got married last month. Rebecca lost custody of her children in the divorce, so they'll be free to manipulate each other without involving innocent kids. They deserve each other after she left." I opened the envelope and read through the legal documents that officially ended Eugene's fraudulent marriage. Justice served through the court system rather than family revenge. Protection achieved through law rather than manipulation. That weekend, Howard called for the first time since his letter. "Dad, I wanted to let you know that Beverly and I broke up. She moved back to California to live with her family. I waited for whatever request would follow this information. I've been thinking about a lot of things about how I handled living at your house, about the mistakes I made." His voice sounded different, more subdued than I'd heard it since he was a teenager. "I'm not asking for money or housing or anything. I just wanted to apologize for taking advantage of your generosity for so long." The apology surprised me, not the manipulative performance Beverly would have staged, but something that sounded like genuine recognition of his behavior. What changed reality? Working 2 jobs to afford a studio apartment, paying my own utilities, buying my own food, dealing with landlords who don't care about my excuses. "I never understood how much you were giving me until I had to provide it for myself. And now I understand why you evicted me. It wasn't punishment. It was education." We talked for 20 minutes, the longest conversation we'd had in years that didn't involve requests for money or complaints about fairness. Howard told me about his jobs, his small apartment, his growing understanding of what responsibility actually required. "I'm not asking to move back," he said before hanging up. "I know that ship has sailed, but maybe someday we could have dinner occasionally. When I've proven I can handle my own life without using yours as a backup plan, maybe forgiveness might be possible eventually, but trust would take years to rebuild." Howard was beginning to understand that actions had consequences, but understanding wasn't the same as changing ingrained patterns. Eugene hadn't called since his marriage announcement. According to business acquaintances who'd seen him around town, he was struggling financially. His insurance practice was suffering as word spread about his personal ethical problems. Rebecca apparently wasn't working, having lost her children and most of her divorce settlement to legal fees. They'd built their new relationship on the wreckage of their old ones, learning nothing from the pain they'd caused, repeating the same patterns of exploitation and entitlement that had destroyed their previous marriages. Some people learned from consequences, others just looked for new sources of what they'd lost. Winter in Phoenix brought mild days and cool evenings perfect for working in the garage workshop I'd set up in the space where Howard used to park his broken-down truck. Woodworking had become more than a hobby. It was meditation, creation, the satisfaction of building something useful with my own hands. I was sanding a bookshelf I'd designed for the senior center when my phone rang. Nancy's number. "Leonard, I have some news I thought you should hear. Eugene and Rebecca's wedding photos are making rounds on social media. Apparently, some of the guests recognize Rebecca from her previous marriage, and people are asking uncomfortable questions. What kind of questions? Timeline questions. When her divorce was finalized versus when their relationship started. When his divorce was finalized versus when they got engaged. People are connecting dots. The social consequences I'd never pursued were happening naturally. Their community was discovering what I'd learned through Nancy's photographs. Eugene and Rebecca had built their relationship on deception and betrayal. How are you hearing about this? Photography circles are smaller than people think. Word travels when public figures get married under questionable circumstances. Some wedding guests are requesting refunds for gifts, claiming they were deceived about the nature of the celebration. Poetic justice. They'd scammed wedding guests just as Eugene had scammed guests at his fraudulent marriage to Patricia. Now different guests, but the same pattern of exploitation being exposed. "I thought you'd want to know," Nancy continued, "not for revenge, but for closure. Sometimes the truth takes time to reach everyone it should reach." After she hung up, I continued sanding the bookshelf, thinking about truth and time and consequences. I'd done nothing to expose Eugene and Rebecca beyond protecting myself and my assets. Their reputation problems were entirely the result of their own choices, their own patterns, their own inability to learn from previous mistakes. Spring brought unexpected developments. Howard had been promoted to assistant manager at the auto parts store, demonstrating reliability and work ethic that surprised his supervisor. He'd moved to a better apartment, bought a reliable used car with his own savings, started taking community college classes in business management. He called monthly now, brief conversations that focused on his progress rather than requests for assistance. Small steps toward rebuilding a relationship based on respect rather than exploitation. I wanted you to know I paid off my credit card debt, he told me during one of these calls. First time in my adult life, I don't owe money to anyone. How does it feel? Strange. But good strange, like I actually own my life instead of borrowing it from other people. Eugene, by contrast, had disappeared from community visibility. His insurance practice had failed, his office space abandoned, his professional reputation destroyed by stories of marriage fraud and affair scandals. Patricia had heard he was working as a sales clerk somewhere, having lost his insurance license due to ethical violations. Rebecca wasn't working at all, having lost her children and most of her divorce settlement to legal bills. They'd moved to a small apartment in a different part of town, starting over with nothing except each other and the patterns of manipulation that had destroyed their previous relationships. Some people learned, others just found new victims for old schemes. My 60th birthday arrived in late spring with quiet celebration. Nancy and I had dinner at a nice restaurant, discussing art and photography and travel plans I'd never made time for during years of managing family crises. You know what I'd like to do for my next birthday? I told her over dessert. Take that photography workshop you mentioned in Sedona. Learn to see the world the way you do. I'd love to teach you. Photography is about patience, observation, waiting for the right moment to capture truth. Truth. The word that had defined the past year of my life, learning it, accepting it, protecting myself from people who preferred comfortable lies. The senior center had installed my bookshelf in their library, a piece of furniture that would serve people who appreciated craftsmanship rather than demanded it as entitlement. My volunteer work there had expanded to teaching basic repair skills to residents who wanted to maintain independence in their apartments. Honest work for grateful people, the kind of relationships I should have demanded from my family years earlier. Thompson called that week with final updates on estate planning. Everything's bulletproof now, Leonard. Your assets are protected, your wishes are documented, your legacy is secured. No one can challenge this structure successfully. My legacy. Hardware stores that serve the community honestly. Property that would eventually house people who needed assistance rather than people who demanded it. Savings that would fund education and medical care for people who couldn't afford it themselves. Everything I'd built over 30 years of work, protected from people who saw inheritance as entitlement rather than gift. That evening, I sat on my patio watching the sunset paint the desert mountains in shades of gold and purple. The guest house stood empty and peaceful, restored to its intended purpose. My home felt like mine again, space without tension, quiet without manipulation. My phone showed no missed calls demanding money, no texts requesting bailouts, no voicemails explaining why family loyalty required financial sacrifice. For the first time in decades, my relationships were based on choice rather than obligation, respect rather than exploitation, honesty rather than manipulation. I'd lost 2 sons to their own greed and entitlement, but I'd gained something more valuable: the truth about who they really were, and the freedom to build relationships with people who valued what I offered rather than demanded what I owned. Nancy would arrive tomorrow for our weekly coffee, bringing stories about her latest photography projects and questions about my woodworking progress. Real friendship based on mutual interest and respect. Howard might call this weekend, sharing news about his community college classes and his growing understanding of independence. But whether he called or not, whether he continued growing or reverted to old patterns, my peace didn't depend on his choices anymore. It was late August, exactly 1 year after Nancy's phone call had shattered my illusions, when I received the letter that brought everything full circle. The envelope was expensive, cream-colored paper with embossed lettering. Inside, an invitation to Eugene and Rebecca's first wedding anniversary party. Apparently, they decided to celebrate surviving 12 months of marriage built on the wreckage of their previous relationships. I read it twice, amazed at their continued belief that I might participate in honoring their union. The invitation included a handwritten note from Eugene. "Dad, I know we've had our differences, but family is family. Rebecca and I have learned so much about commitment and compromise this year. We'd love to share our anniversary celebration with you and hopefully start rebuilding our relationship on stronger ground. I set the invitation aside and walked out to my patio, where the late afternoon sun was painting the mountains in familiar shades of gold and purple. 1 year ago, I'd been a different person entirely, someone who confused enabling with love, manipulation with family loyalty, exploitation with normal relationships. The guest house caught my eye, restored and peaceful, occasionally used now by friends visiting from out of town. Real guests who appreciated hospitality rather than demanded it as entitlement. My phone rang, Howard's number, right on schedule for our monthly conversation. Dad, I wanted to let you know I got accepted into the State University business program. Part-time while I keep working, but it's a real degree program, not just community college classes. That's excellent news, Howard. You should be proud. I am. And I wanted to ask you something. Not for money, he added quickly, for advice. I'm thinking about starting my own auto parts business eventually. Small operation, maybe specializing in vintage car restoration supplies. What do you think? The question represented everything that had changed between us. Not a demand for startup capital, not an expectation that I would fund his dreams, but genuine interest in my experience and perspective. It's a good market if you understand it thoroughly. Vintage car enthusiasts are passionate customers who appreciate quality and expertise. But you'll need to know your inventory inside and out. We talked for 30 minutes about business planning, customer relationships, inventory management, a real conversation between two adults who respected each other's knowledge and experience. Dad, Howard said before hanging up, I know you got an invitation to Eugene's anniversary party. Are you going? No, I didn't think so. I got one too. Even though Eugene and I haven't talked since the eviction, I think he's trying to create an image of family reconciliation for Rebecca's sake. What are you going to do? Skip it. I'm not interested in pretending that what happened last year didn't happen. Some bridges get burned for good reasons. After he hung up, I walked through my house, noting details that had become symbols of my transformation. The coffee maker that worked because no one smashed it out of spite. The living room chair that held only me because no one sprawled across it demanding beer service. The kitchen table where I ate meals at my own pace without background noise from entitled tenants. The doorbell rang, Nancy, arriving for our weekly dinner together. We'd started cooking for each other occasionally, simple meals shared with conversation about books and travel plans and photography projects. You look thoughtful, she said as I led her in. Everything okay? I showed her Eugene's invitation. She read it, then looked at me with the photographer's eye that had started this entire journey. Are you tempted to go? Not even slightly. Good. Some stories don't need sequels, especially when the original ending was exactly what it needed to be. We cooked dinner together, grilled fish and vegetables from my garden, sharing wine while the desert sunset painted my patio in perfect light. Peaceful conversation with someone who valued honesty over manipulation, respect over entitlement. I have some news, Nancy said over dessert. I'm planning a photography exhibition next spring. Desert landscapes, but also portraits of people who found peace after difficult transitions. I was hoping you might let me include a portrait of you. What kind of portrait? Something that shows who you've become. Maybe in your workshop or here on the patio or at one of your hardware stores. The story of someone who chose truth over comfort, boundaries over exploitation. I thought about that as we cleaned up dinner. A portrait representing transformation, growth, the courage to protect what you've built from people who see it as opportunity rather than achievement. I'd be honored. After Nancy left, I sat in my office reviewing the trust documents one final time. Everything protected, every asset secured, every wish documented. My legacy would serve people who needed assistance rather than people who demanded it. The phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, then decided to satisfy my curiosity. Mr. Miller, this is Rebecca. I know we haven't talked since everything happened, but I wanted to reach out personally about the anniversary party. I received the invitation. I know Eugene hurt you badly, and I know I was part of that, but people change, relationships grow stronger through adversity. We've learned so much about commitment this year. The practiced sincerity in her voice reminded me of Beverly's manipulation attempts, Eugene's insurance sales techniques, all the people who tried to convince me that their convenience was more important than my boundaries. I hope you have a lovely celebration. Does that mean you'll come? It means I hope you're happy with the choices you've made. I hung up and deleted the number. Walking out to my patio one final time that evening, I looked at the stars appearing in the desert sky. Clear air, quiet night, peaceful space earned through the courage to say no to people who mistook kindness for weakness. Tomorrow would bring another day at the hardware stores helping customers with honest transactions. Another evening of woodworking or reading or conversation with Nancy. Another step in a life built on choice rather than obligation, respect rather than exploitation. My sons had taught me an invaluable lesson. though not the one they'd intended. They'd shown me the difference between love and manipulation, between family and exploitation, between generosity and enabling. Some people deserved my time, attention, and resources. Others had forfeited that privilege through their choices. The difference was everything. Justice wasn't revenge. It was protection. It was boundaries. It was saying no when no was the only sane answer, and discovering that self-respect was worth more than family approval. I'd saved myself from people who saw love as obligation and family as opportunity. And for the first time in decades, that was enough.